One. All right, I'm going to just make sure that we're live. There is a little bit of a lag, so let's just see. All right, we are live. And it's 7:03 on time. I'd consider that on time. All right. I don't know if anybody is on right now, but we're going to go. All right. So welcome to the third featured artist talk, which is part of a drawing club that I host. My name is Brian Christopher, and the club is Shut Up and Draw. And a huge part of this club is all about I think finding inspiration in other artists and talking with other artists and understanding how they create. And I'm super lucky to have Susan Logoreci with us. I was pointed in her direction from our previous featured artist, Adrienne Alabi, and I'm super fortunate that we were able to connect and that she was excited to do this. And if you are not familiar with her work, I highly recommend checking it out while you're watching this. There is a link to her Instagram account, and so I would open a separate window and scroll through, and there's a lot of work. Definitely a lot of work. There's a ton of detail, and if you're a fan of bridging abstraction and realism, you know, she's, I think, one of the people that does a really good job at that. Also, I think it's important to just right off the bat know that all of this work is colored pencil, which is I don't understand. I don't. We're gonna get a chance to hear about what the motivation is on there, but I'm going to hand this over to Susan and let her introduce herself, and then I think we're just going to have kind of a casual conversation, and she'll share some of her work along the way. And if you guys have questions, definitely feel free to type them into the chat on this or leave a comment, and I'll be monitoring that so I can jump in and try to pitch those to her throughout, or we could save them till the end. So either way, just throw some questions at us and we'll try to answer those. So here you go, Susan.
Thank you so much for having me. I really am looking forward to sharing my work with you all. I am an artist. I make contemporary landscape art. I make drawings for the most part. I also have been making paintings recently too, and I do public art as well. Just a little bit about me. I was born and raised in Monterey, California. I got my BFA from the San Francisco Art Institute and my MFA from Cal State Long Beach. I also worked at the Getty Museum for about 5 years after graduate school. I was also making my work and showing in galleries, and I started selling out shows and getting reviews and getting commissions, and I quit my day job in 2005, and I've been a full-time artist ever since. So yeah, that's basically my background in a nutshell. And the work I'm going to be showing is probably about 25% of everything, or maybe even less. So you can get a sense of, I have made a lot of work in the last, 20 years probably. It's almost been 20 years since graduate school. In 2003 I graduated, so.
Gotcha.
I
don't even. That's the thing that I don't understand is how you've made. Considering the. I think it's important to understand the scale of some of your pieces, and then the fact that you are using colored pencil in most cases. I'm surprised your portfolio isn't like 5 pieces instead of. You have so much work at such a large scale. I don't understand what you just seem to work fast. You're prolific. I don't get it, but congrats.
It's all I do, I think, is what it is. I don't really do much else.
Yeah. Well, okay, that's part of the explanation.
Yeah.
Can you share? I'm always curious how the transition is from school to the real world.
Yeah.
Can you tell us about that?
I mean, I would say I I feel like I never left the real world after undergrad. I was out of school for about 7 years and I worked a variety of jobs, like all kinds of crazy jobs. And then I started applying for graduate school. And when I was attending school, I worked the whole time. And then I worked at the Getty during graduate school, and then I got a full-time position there right as I was graduating. So I went right back
Yeah.
to working full-time. So, um, yeah, I felt like I never, like graduate school wasn't a big break from the working world for me. I still was doing that as well, which was fine, you know. I mean, there were a lot of complaints though that I wasn't, because I was making this kind of labor intensive work then too. That it was like, how are you going to actually
Right.
make a whole show? How are you going to kind of create a body of work, you know, with your schedule being like that? But, you
Right.
know, I didn't
And
sleep. I was like,
so, okay, so this is another interesting point. Like, you already found your path and your voice and your subject matter and your. I mean, it seems like you discovered all this early on, or at least in grad school, and that's kind of what you've been riffing on that ever since, and exploring it and pushing it in different directions, and in some crazy directions. We'll get into the optical illusion stuff later, but how did you first land on the subject matter and just your approach to all this? How did that develop?
yeah, I guess I've always done landscape based work. I started college when I was 17. I started junior college. Actually left high school early, took a GED and started junior college. And I started doing landscape based work even then. It was more imagined um, back then than it was from life. And the big transition for me in graduate school was really like working from photographs and actually working from life, from reference material more. I always had, but it was sort
Yeah.
of not not such a focus as it was after graduate school, I would say. But I've always done landscape-based work. That's always been really important to me. I mean, I grew up in Monterey. There's a long tradition there of landscape-based work that goes back to the turn of the 20th century. So I think that's definitely part of it. And also, my father immigrated here. He was actually a refugee. He never was able to go back home. And so this idea of place as being important and home as being important was always sort of kind of in my mind, I think, even as a child.
Gotcha. I was looking at the chat. Looks like Adrian is here, and Jamie.
Oh, hey.
Jamie's in our club, so and she knows Adrian. There's a lot of highs going back and forth,
Nice.
so they're with us. So I think what did a lot of this come from within, or were you inspired by particular artists or styles of art? Who were big influences?
Yeah, actually, can I share my screen?
Yeah. Here we go.
Show
Let's.
you some. There we go. That actually was an earlier piece of mine where it was more sort of imagined um, landscapes, although they were sort of sketches. This was when I was going to art school in San Francisco. So I would sort of go around the city and make these sketches. The red road is actually the path at the Palace of Fine Arts. The church in the lower left is the church in North Beach. And so I would make sketches, kind of plein air type of thing, and then kind of collage them together and create these paintings. In the upper left, you can see like the fields sort of back to Monterey, Salinas,
Yeah.
area. So there's that in there too. So that was sort of what my earlier work. That's maybe like a 2 by 3 foot painting, oil painting. So that was 1994 probably. And so who I was looking at, let me see if I can pull up. I was really influenced by Irving Norman, who's like a social surrealist. He had a studio near Half Moon Bay, actually, and I really loved his work a lot, and just his use of abstraction too. His work was really political and really about how capitalism is crushing us, basically.
Yeah.
And he wasn't very famous in his lifetime because he wouldn't actually sell his work to a lot of rich people. He just wasn't into them. So people don't really know his work that well, but I've always been a huge fan of his. And really, when I was a student, particularly. So I was looking at him and, uh, of course, Wayne Thiebaud.
Yeah.
Famous,
Okay.
especially the San Francisco pieces, the sort of dizzy city and his use of color too. I really enjoyed that. But really thinking about abstraction too. I mean, all these artists have that in common, I think.
Yeah. Wayne Thiebaud, definitely, that was somebody that came to mind when I first saw your work. I tried to write down a bunch of artists that I saw, and that he was definitely one of them. So
He just turned 100.
oh.
Yeah, like a couple weeks ago, and he probably was painting. He still paints.
I remember seeing an article not long ago, but I kind of didn't realize how old he was. But yeah, it sounds like he's still pretty prolific. I think he paints every day. So
yeah, he paints every day, and he does a lot. He's in Sacramento, I want to say now, because he does a lot of paintings about the Sacramento Delta, which is a really great subject matter, I think, as well. Yeah, I've always been, he's one of those artists that I loved in the beginning, I still love. And Georgia O'Keeffe too, This is like her city series that she did when she was in New York. I love those paintings. I go back to those a lot. And just like the sky, the chunk of sky in this painting is that abstract shape is so wonderful,
I don't even know if I've seen that painting before.
Yeah, and that's the other thing. Like, I'm still seeing work from her that I've never seen because you're so used to seeing the poppies and the sort of standards, but she did a lot of paintings of New York. I think she was there for 4 years. She did some Brooklyn Bridge paintings too. She liked to go and drive by the Brooklyn Bridge and just look at it because it was such a symbol of modernity at that time. Anyway, she was definitely on the roster. And one of my favorites, Roger Brown, Chicago imagist. And he's sort of all over the place. He's made a lot of political work as well, but then sort of, just a lot of random paintings too. There's one he made about John Wayne Gacy and true crime before it was cool. But I love his paintings and that sort of really graphic, flat style and pattern abstraction, And he used those silhouettes a lot. He actually had a house in Ventura towards the end of his life. So he was not from California. I think he was from the South, ended up in Chicago, but then ended up out here eventually. So I've always been a huge fan of his as well. And then more recently, I've been looking at Ken Price.
Okay. Yeah, that's
his paintings. So he's mostly known for ceramic sculpture, but he made all these amazing paintings. I guess he calls them drawings because they're ink on paper. And before the shutdown, actually, I got to see a show of them here in LA. And I just ordered a catalog of them. I'm really excited. But he did a lot of these kind of like aerial views from interiors. So there's this kind of interior exterior play.
Yeah.
Which is really cool.
I'm Google image searching right now and looking at all his.
Yeah, there's a great one. The
pieces.
Famous one is of Highway 1, where in Santa Monica, of the cliff. That's the famous one. That one's pretty well.
Oh yeah. Wait, is there does
There's
his have a car going off of it? Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't know if somebody messed with his art. Okay, that's the original.
It's like a painting it's like a meme painting.
It totally is.
I love that. Yeah, but he's not really as known. He's mostly known for the ceramics.
Which are
but
really
I
cool.
love these so much. I've been looking at these a lot lately. These are really just the graphic quality of them too.
So
really fun.
So if you started in oil, what happened with departing from oil painting, and how did you come into working on paper and using colored pencil?
I always worked on paper. In San Francisco, I didn't have a car, And so I would take public transportation and I could roll it up and take it with me
Yeah.
everywhere. So I worked on oil, but it was always on paper because just moving things was such a headache. And after graduate school, I still painted probably first semester of graduate school. I want to say I was painting as well. I just never was one of those artists that loved the paint, and how painters talk about paint is really as like a seductive material where it's that shop talk around paint is always so um, like specific and there's this like loving relationship with it. And to me, it was just a tool. And I thought, well, there's other tools, and the great thing about colored pencil is you can't, when I didn't have a lot of time to work, it was like I could pick it up and put it down with no setup,
Yeah.
So it was convenient. And also, I think just for my work, all these little bits and pieces coming together to make up a city, it's like the pencil is also doing that in a way paint didn't do. So I like how the material kind of mirrors the content.
Yeah.
That was a byproduct that I didn't really expect.
Right.
And so,
well, I can
that's
definitely
there.
appreciate the practical side to the answer because these are all the
Yeah,
things. I mean, unless you have a dedicated studio and you're able to leave your paint setup indefinitely, it's just
yeah,
it's hard to work impulsively or spontaneously and incrementally. It's like you kind of have to
yes.
commit a larger block of time to
You need 2
painting.
hours minimum to
Yeah,
paint. You
yeah,
do. And with drawing, you can do 20 minutes really easily. And I
yeah.
really liked that. We could just grab a few minutes a day or a few minutes throughout the day and kind of work on things.
Okay, but let's be realistic. Your drawings are massive. So, like, how much
Some
time
of
are you
them, yeah.
clocking? How much? What does your typical day in the studio look like? And I
Um,
mean, do you break it up? Do you take a lot of breaks? And yeah, what is?
no, I
Oh,
don't actually. I should take more breaks and I should take days off, and I don't actually do those things as much as I should. Lately, the last year has been different than ever before, I would say. I've been extremely lucky to be very busy this year with really exciting projects. And so my day has looked pretty different. There's a lot more project management and um, design work and stuff like that, and a lot of 9 to 5 administrative work
yeah,
that I have to do. So I definitely clear my 9 to 5 schedule to be able to do emails and phone calls and Zoom meetings and stuff like that. And then after 5, it's like creative time, whatever that is. If there's design work that has to be done, or I have to work with fabrication samples, that's taken up a lot of my time lately. That all happens usually after 5 because I like having like a chunk of time to just really focus on that
yeah.
uninterrupted. And all the emails and back and forth can really, it just really breaks up your day.
Well,
So
unless you're on top of it, by that I mean like if you are able to shut it all off, but still
yeah,
be sitting next to a computer, that's great. But like, that's almost impossible
no,
to
I
do.
can't do that. Yeah,
Yeah,
and you're waiting for a response. And
yeah, yeah,
like they need you to respond, and then you have to wait for the team to respond. And it's like
yeah,
um, it takes a lot of my time, but that is not normal. Usually, my workday has been um, I do a couple hours administrative work and then actually just making stuff the rest of the day. So, but I still usually work in the studio 5 p.m. till about at least 11 or 12.
gotcha. So, and this
So
is, I
I'm
mean, okay, and that's how many days a week are you doing that?
7 days a week. Yeah, I don't take a day off. I should take a day off. It's
Oh
not
man,
healthy. I'll admit that.
you're you're like a marathon runner.
Yeah.
Jesus.
I mean, I
Okay.
like to work. I like to be busy, but also it's like I do. It is. It. You do need to have a balanced life, and
Yeah.
you know, too. It is important, I think, just for mental health. I could be better at that, for
Yeah.
sure.
I'm sure all of us could could be better. So okay, so I'm kind of skimming my my questions because there are still so many. But okay, some of what you've already been referencing is the fact that you're not just working in the studio on your own work for your own sake. You're also doing public art. You have probably a creative brief or a design brief. There's a team involved. There's probably lawyers involved. There's architects. There's a lot of people. How does that how does that differ from, the lonely studio artist that only has themselves to
Right.
answer to?
Yeah.
And then I guess another part of that is like how did you decide to transition into public art and when?
Yeah, those are great questions. I would say for the first question, yeah, it's more complicated, especially as the projects are getting bigger, it's getting more complicated
Yeah.
and it's more exciting too. So I mean, that's the flip side of that. I mean, the good thing is it's a very 9 to 5 world, Monday through Friday. So that's nice. So anytime outside of that, I
Yeah,
don't
you're not
expect
gonna hear from anybody. Yeah.
no. So
Yeah.
that's actually kind of unlike, the art world that is like operates all the time. It's like the public art world is it's very democratic. It's very 9 to 5. I would say that working at the Getty really helped me out a lot, having that background. I was just administrative assistant there for about 5 years. Um, and I was working in imaging services department where it was like a service department within the museum. And so we would coordinate like how the artwork would come. I would coordinate how it would come into the studio to be photographed, and then those photographs would be used for the banners, books, etc. But just learning how to kind of manage a lot of different moving parts, it was so
Yeah.
important. Like that was actually so helpful to me now to have that background. I think if I didn't have that, I think public art, a lot of artists I think start out in it and they get driven away because of this like heavy administrative side that
Right.
can be really intimidating if you don't know how to manage it. Um, but and it isn't the fun part, either. I mean, in
Right.
terms of being an artist. So I think I can see why a lot of artists begin with it and then just decide it's like way too much work. And that creative side is not the whole story, you
Right.
know. So and then how did I get into it? Actually, I'll show. Oh, sorry.
Here, I was just gonna. Well, here. Why don't you go ahead?
Yeah, I'll flip ahead a little bit actually. Let me go to.
The only thing I was gonna say is, with public art, you kind of have to. You have to be pretty. You have to have your style and your subject matter pretty well established because I imagine they want to base what your previous work was on, or they want to base the project and the final outcome on what you've done already. I'm sure that helps them conceive what the art is going to look like before it actually is, planned or sketched or presented, which is another question I'm going to ask next.
Yeah, there's a whole pretty rigid workflow to how things get done too. That's a little bit challenging, I think, as an artist too. It could be a little more streamlined on the artist end.
Yeah.
It definitely benefits administrators more.
This
So
photo is amazing. I've only, yeah, I haven't been able to see these. I haven't understood the scale of them, but I mean, wow. How
these
awesome is
are
that?
this is how actually when I quit my day job, this was the big commission that I got through City National Bank. This is in their downtown Los Angeles headquarters in their cafeteria. And these are 3 4 by 6 foot color pencil drawings that I was commissioned to make
Oh
for
man.
that space. Um, that was a really exciting project. And um, it took me about 3 or 4 months to make these. They were pretty fast, actually.
The
But this is sort of what got me into public art. So my work, I was selling work through a gallery and getting commissions, and my work was kind of ending up in these public areas like cafeterias and boardrooms and lobbies. And so I thought, I should start applying for public art. When I was in graduate school, I really public art was something that was, you either had a career in public art or you had a career in the gallery world, and you really weren't allowed to do both, or people didn't. I don't know. But I feel like that has changed a lot since in 20 years,
Okay.
where you can do both. And there's a lot more municipal investment in public art than there was then too. There's a lot more cities that have that 1% for the arts. So any new construction, they have to give 1% to public art, and they can either have the city manage it or the developers can do it themselves. So
Gotcha.
anyway, I started applying for projects, and the first one I applied for was at LAX. Um, and so I took those 3 drawings that you just saw, and I had them photographed at 1,000%, and then
Yeah.
stitched them together in Photoshop. And then I actually took the middle drawing and kind of doubled it.
I'm
So
noticing that. Yeah.
and these are 30 feet long. Each one is 30 feet long, 10 feet tall. Then the budget was $5,000 for this, and I think I kept like $200.
I was gonna say, like, I know how expensive, yeah, large format printing and reproduction is,
Yeah,
and yeah,
and
that's
you have to pay for installation too, of course.
God.
And then the lights actually were so hot that it started peeling, so I had to get them to come back out and fix it. And
Oh
that
man.
was a great lesson though, where it's like you have to factor in all that stuff, and you have to put in an overage fee in case there's problems. So it was
Right.
a big learning curve just doing that, but it was so fantastic to see something on a big scale like that. Um, and
Yeah. Yeah. I
the
can't imagine.
I've done. I'm on my 4th project down there now, actually. Temporary
So,
project.
so one of the exhibits I saw in your Instagram feed was called Window Seat,
Hmm.
and I love that exhibit so much. I wish I could see it in person, but I mean, how many artist Instagram feeds you see where, I mean, anytime anybody goes on an artist goes on a trip on a plane in particular, they always have their sketchbook, and there's always going to be sketching of the people sitting next to them or out the window. And so right away I just
Right,
loved
right.
that part of it. Like, of course there's an art show looking out of plane windows. I'm surprised that I hadn't seen that before, and I thought that was really clever. I think it would be a fun group show to actually do. Um, but
Yeah.
but your images alone are really they're so fun, and sorry to skip ahead, but
No,
I don't know. And I think what was so nice about them is they're on a smaller scale, and they're a little bit
uh-huh.
more, they feel a little bit more intimate. And I just love the frame. Like, I'm talking about just the border of where the drawing stops, and that there is not
Yeah.
like a harsh outline or anything like that. You're just suggesting the shape of the window, and that's where the drawing ends, and there's something beautiful about that. And I don't know. There's just
Oh, thank you.
the show really connected with me. So how did
Oh,
that
thank
come
you.
about? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I did. I applied again to do another project there before the pandemic, and I think we had a meeting. I want to say September, October 2019, and then they wanted to install in like early 2020, like January or maybe December 2019. So it didn't give me a lot of time to make new work, and I really
Yeah.
wanted to have new work in this space. And so I had this whole idea with these pieces that I was going to have like these fancy mats made that looked like airplane shaped windows. And the budget for this, I think, was like 6,000 or
Okay.
7,000. And I wanted to do a big mural again too. This mural.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so the budget didn't really cover fancy mats that were airplane shaped, so window shaped. So I ended up just going, well, I can just actually paint that shape too, and that's free. you know.
Yep.
So it was really just an economical decision too, but I really think it worked out. It makes the paintings feel a lot more um, just looser and more, I think, free spirited. And so then the pandemic hit. So we were supposed to install right when the pandemic hit. and they, LAX just emptied. They closed the airport, if you remember.
Mm-hmm.
And so they pushed the installation. I think they installed it in like March or April. And I was really concerned that this work would be the wrong work for the moment, that it would almost be like in a denial or something, that
Yeah.
it was so happy that would be problematic.
Mm-hmm.
So I was kind of concerned about that. So just to describe it, there's this the mural I showed you, and then I think there's 8 of these windows. They're about 2 by 3 feet that show kind of different ideas, things that you think about Los Angeles, like freeways, the pier, Hollywood sign, things like that.
Right.
So kind of these like almost like these kind of ideas of like, the stereotype of what you think of Los Angeles too.
Totally.
But I got really great feedback from the people that work there that they actually felt like it brought a lot of light in, and that it was sort of this uplifting experience during a kind of dark, difficult time. So it was actually
Yeah.
a bit of positivity, and I felt very relieved about that, because you don't want to, I don't know, kind of have the wrong vibe for a difficult moment. You don't want to seem like you're, dancing on graves or something. That's, I definitely would never want to do that. So, but it seemed like, art can really help in difficult times too. And so that's the flip side too. It's like that's possible. And the work functioned in this way that I didn't really know was going to happen. Because obviously we didn't know there was going to be a pandemic in September, October 2019.
Yeah.
So anyway, it'll be there for a year. It'll be there, I think, through September 2021. And then I'm installing 3 more pieces in
Awesome.
another exhibit in a new wing they just opened up, actually.
All right.
These pieces that are more, I'm actually putting in.
I'm gonna have to try to fly out of LAX so I can check this stuff out. This is cool.
This piece is going to be there, actually.
Yes. All right, then there's the introduction of the optical illusions. Gosh, I want to dive into that so bad. And that's the question I have bolded really large on my on my screen. Before we go there, let me just one of the questions I had is, what do you want your viewer to experience or take away from your work? And it was interesting because you kind of just answered what the people at LAX, some of the staff and employees and people that were there, what they saw and got out of your work, which is really cool. I'm just curious if, what do you have in mind? What do you hope people get out of your work? Is it a single thing, or do you want it to be open to interpretation? Is there a particular feeling or mood? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. I think especially in the work that I do in airports, and I'm actually doing a really exciting project right now. I'm designing a 10,000 square foot floor in the Phoenix airport. It's been an incredible experience. It's going to be in Terrazzo. I think in airports, it's really important to have this kind of feeling of delight. That's not a feeling people think or talk about when they, imagine going to an airport. Usually it's, oh, I have to do a fly, and it's going to be this ordeal,
Yeah.
But you remember the first time you ever flew, and it's like, it's such an exciting moment that just really kind of recreating that for people, that really putting attention on that, of this sort of idea of delight and wonder. And I think that goes into a lot of my work. I think that when I was in school, there was definitely, a lot of, my teachers would talk about, that I had to kind of bring in this dystopian element. And there was this, it was right after 9/11 actually that I was in graduate school. So this idea of aerial views in 2001, meant something really specific. City as target. Like there was a different kind of idea around that maybe too. And so my work was a lot less colorful and joyful, I think, when I was in school. And after school, I really felt like I could embrace that more. and really talk about, delight and wonder and awe and hope and those types of things. I think one way to do that without being super saccharine is to have something a little dark in there too. And I think my work does have this kind of like frenzy and this anxiety to it too sometimes, where there's almost like too much time in the fun house type of vibe.
Good analogy.
Where it's like, yeah, like how I always think we have a lot of bee swarms around my house. You know how like a swarm is sort of beautiful and amazing, but it's a little scary too.
Yeah.
Just bringing that in, I think that keeps it. Maybe I try to kind of walk that line. I guess that's sort of my attempt to not be. I don't want to just sort of make these kind of saccharine pieces. And actually, to get back to Wayne Thiebaud, one of the last shows I saw, and I love Wayne Thiebaud, was he did a lot of paintings of like dogs catching frisbees on the beach in like Laguna Beach, and they were just like so joyous, like happy pieces. And I was sort of like, but like, where's where's like that little edge they always had of like that sort of, the hill is too steep and you're like sort of afraid of the hill.
Right.
That was not there. But he's in a different stage of life where it's like, maybe that's I think that's totally fine and great too, but for me, I kind of want to walk that line a little bit. I think the way to talk about wonder and awe is to actually have a little bit of an edge in there too. So
yeah, and I would say that probably, I think once you start getting into the optical illusion treatment, I'd say that definitely supports what you just said, because it's so beautiful. There's a lot of intrigue and mystery. I mean, there's mystery in in how you create that illusion, and then what is happening, and what am I looking through something, or what is not functioning? Why is why is the view obscured like this? And I'm sure you can talk about that more, but I do think you are walking that line and balancing, a really something beautiful with something, maybe at the other end of that. So that's cool to hear you talk about that and suggest that. I think it's working.
Oh, good. Yeah, this work is, I love how people can't quite figure out how I make it too, or that's sort of fun for me.
It's such a damn mystery. I've been scratching my head on this one, like, what does she do?
Yeah, I definitely kind of created a technique that is very confusing actually to make. Like, it's actually very hard to keep track of what I'm doing while I'm doing it. And I'm not totally sure what these are going to look like until they're done, which is
cool. I think that's
terrifying.
Great. Yes, and terrifying.
I mean, the problem is though, they take a month or two to make, and it's like you're gonna just, if they don't work out, then it's like you kind of wasted that time. But so having to kind of trust that process, I guess, has been interesting.
Yeah.
But I think as a maker, you definitely always want to feel like you don't know what's coming next. That is a great feeling, actually.
Right. Yeah, because if you didn't have that, if you could, and this is the thing that's probably misleading about your art in a way, minus the optical illusion aspect of it. Some of your pieces, you almost think are like, oh, this is a paint by number situation. As long as like the hardest part is you map out all the lines and then you just color them in. Well, I'm totally simplifying it, making it sound ridiculously easy. Even that's insanely challenging with the scale and the number of shapes and all the colors and stuff. But
each plane is one color, so
but like that process sounds horribly boring, and I don't know who would be entertained to, it just sounds like you would suffer through that, and potentially the artwork would suffer too. So hearing that you don't know, even you've been working with the same subject, with exploring the same subject matter and materials and all that, but you're still able to, I think, play with chance and spontaneity and just the unknown. And so I do think that's what I'm hearing is that's what's keeping you engaged, and that's what helps you get through a drawing that takes 3 to 4 months. So I think there's a real there's like a real paradox there, because they just don't. It looks like you had to have predicted the exact outcome, and all you're doing is coloring again by number, but that's not the case. And it's hard. It's interesting to hear you say that you can't visualize the final ahead of time. I think that's awesome. I think that's great. It's scary as hell, but it's cool to hear that that's the case.
Yeah, I guess, the work I was doing prior, where it was sort of, and I still make that work too, actually, where it's just sort of more, without these sort of underlying undulating patterns. For me, I don't think it's boring to just fill in colors. Like, there is a meditative quality to it that I really value. And I love working on something that's really big and is going to take forever. And I've actually had people tell me, you should just make a little mark on each one and then hire people to fill it in. I'm like, why would I do that, though? Why would I give away that like meditative space that I love so much, know?
And this is probably...
for me, it really is. Like, I love
and this is like my third, I think, this is probably the fourth time we've talked, and I think I've made the same mistake in claiming that, this should be boring. And I think when I say that, I know it's not, but I think I'm trying to speak on behalf of people that might not understand the process and the mindset, because, and so that's where I'm that's why I'm using the word boring.
I think it takes it definitely is something you have to have a certain brain for, I think. And I think it serves me in some areas and then maybe not so well in other areas, but I never have found it boring, usually. I am painting more, though, now. Ever since I've been doing these public art projects this past year, there's a lot of revisions that have had to happen. Okay. I have not had time to do black pencil. You just cannot do it. So I've been painting more, and I have to say I do kind of like how fast it goes. I don't...
Are you like, wait, why didn't I figure this out 20 years ago?
I do think it has a different quality to it that... it does something different. You can be more expressionist with it, and also you can, you can paint over areas.
And are we talking?
So great, because colored pencil, there's no redo.
Right. Like, are we talking gouache?
Yeah, I've been using gouache.
Okay. Yeah, that seems like a natural transition for you.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. It's great for paper, and I'm not really excited to go back to oil paint, to be honest. I might try it again. I'm interested, actually, the undulating patterns. I'm interested in what that would look like with oil paint. I might attempt that too, because that blending, you can't really do that with gouache.
Right.
It's not. Right. It doesn't lend itself to blending that well. And the colored pencil, it really does. So oil seems like the right choice for a paint, but I haven't really even gone down that road. I might. That's another arena to go and dive into. But I do get asked that a lot. How do you keep your attention on one thing for so long, especially if you know what it's going to look like too? Right.
I'm scanning our questions, and we've done a pretty good job at answering a bunch of them, but man, okay, so do you want to circle back on, I want to know, I want to know, and I'd like everybody else to hear about how the optical illusion started, how did it, how it got introduced into your work, and then, and if if you don't know what I'm talking about or referring to, here, I'm going to share your screen again.
Some earlier stuff.
And what's before you get to the optical illusions, there is a progression where it's like, I feel like you start playing. One of my favorite qualities in your work is all of the multiple perspectives going on, and then you take that. you take it to an extreme in some pieces. There's just like a collision of all these homes and buildings, and in some cases it's subtle. There's subtle shifts, which, it almost reminds me of like cubist paintings where you're looking at a table from the side and from the top at the same time.
Oh yeah.
But then you really start folding, like Inception or The Matrix, or like definitely like Inception. I feel like the city is
Yeah.
getting rolled up and folded on itself, and so there's that quality. And then I think the other thing that's really interesting is all the white space that you choose to use, which I can't wait for you to say, oh yeah, I do that because it saves me it saves me time. But I know that's not the reason. But like the white space is so beautiful,
I mean, that's true
and
though.
and it's also such a good it's a place for your eye to rest. I mean, you can't
Absolutely. Yeah.
if you didn't have that, I don't know. I don't know what would happen to our brains. I think they would just melt.
Yeah.
So,
But I have done away with that in the most recent pieces,
I,
actually, and it is still like too much.
and
Like
I
it's a lot.
yeah
It is a lot of that pattern, and it's unrelenting a little bit. You know.
yeah.
Uh,
So yeah,
uh,
can you tell us about like how well, I don't know if you want to talk about the white space, or how the illusion started happening, and then like
sure. I think
what.
this was the beginning of it. Actually,
Okay.
this was grad school work. Actually, this was sort of the first pieces that I made for that's similar to the work I'm making now. This is sort of what put me on the path. Because before this, I was making more kind of personal pieces that were um, collaged and kind of imagined spaces, and then I started working from photographs and from those above books. Remember
Yeah.
those? So
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
yeah, now. um, this is the Beverly Hills Triangle, and this is about 2 by 3 feet. But anyway, just taking away the public space in the streets, and thinking about the absence of public space too. I think that was a big reason why I did that. And then also, it created this. It really flattened the
Hmm.
space out in a great way too, where it flips back and forth between flat and dimensional. And I
Yeah.
loved that so much. And I did a bunch of pieces like that. This was mostly my thesis show, actually.
Yeah. This is so cool.
And it really does this thing where you get that flipping back and forth. And that is actually how I experience perspective in some ways. So I was born without binocular vision. So I only use one eye at a time. So I have very limited depth perception. And when I was at first going to art school and like trying to draw the still life with everybody else, it was like the teacher would always say, well, what's the space and what's the object? Like they couldn't figure it out in my in
Hmm.
my work. And I just remember thinking, God, I'm never really going to nail that probably because it is confusing for me in the world. And so how can I kind of express that or use that in a way? Because I'm not going to be able to kind of morph myself, shapeshift myself into this other person that is expected, that I'm supposed to be to get an A in this class or whatever. Um, so I think in graduate school, I started really exploring that more. Um, let's see, there's a few more of these.
You shared that with me, on our last
Thank you.
call, and I I mean, it's not something that anybody would expect as an explanation for how you're creating your work and why, and where it's coming from. And I'm completely fascinated by that, and that you struggled with it in the beginning, but then found a way to totally embrace it. Which, I mean, what else are you gonna do? Like,
Yeah,
you had to do that.
yeah,
And what a unique asset. I mean, you totally put a positive spin on the whole thing, and now you have work that is extremely unique that probably isn't going to come from many other artists. It's like
Right.
I'm it's super fascinating. Yeah, look
Yeah,
at this. Like,
it
look
is
at the
specific to me
perspective.
for sure. I mean, and that's interesting. I don't make work that's autobiographical, but anymore at all. But I mean, I'm definitely the way that I see it's very imprinted in my work because how can it not be? You
Yeah,
know,
yeah.
and yeah. So I actually, when I was a child, I had 4 surgeries to correct this, and this is like a birth defect that's very correctable now. Now they take little babies that are 6 months old.
Right,
It's laser surgery, outpatient. You have binocular vision again.
right.
But for me, I grew up in the 70s, and it was like very barbaric surgery. And I had several of them and actually, I remember the last couple of them where I was like blind for like a month afterwards, as my eyes were healing. Um, so there was a lot of kind of trauma in it as well. I think like looking back, I remember one of my first memories, and I'm not making this up, is being put in a straitjacket actually
Oh my
because they were
god.
trying to like take off the bandages and I was like fighting them, I guess. And I don't have like white coat panic. Like I can go to the doctor, it's fine. But still, like
Man.
I feel like today they would not have done that. But anyway, so now that I'm getting older, my vision's changing. Everybody once you hit 40, everybody needs reading glasses, right?
Hmm.
So my eyes are actually competing with each other, and I'm getting a lot more double vision that I've never really had before. And so this newer work is sort of growing out of that experience. This sort of like vibration that you see in that work is actually
Yeah.
something I'm experiencing more in life.
Wow.
And so I thought, how can I express this? And then also I feel like, let me pull up some of those pieces.
Susan, is this strabismus or something different?
Yes, it's a form of it. Yes.
Okay, because my
There's
daughter
a
has.
specific name for it. I can't remember right now, but yes.
Yeah, yeah. My
A lot
daughter
of
has
artists actually.
strabismus, she went through one of the surgeries, and so
Oh,
this
no
is all
kidding.
sounding familiar. And I wasn't sure if it was the same thing, but yeah, like you said, it's easily correctable. But we did like the patching on the eyes, and we're still doing
Uh-huh.
that, and she still has to wear glasses and all that. But yeah, it's interesting because when your eyes are not working together, you take that for granted, and when they're not doing
Yeah.
that, it wreaks havoc on your brain. So this is
Your
this is
brain tries to compensate in all these different ways. The brain is actually really good at like creating all these compensations. It's
right.
kind of amazing, actually.
Yeah, and that's what we were learning is absolutely like if the brain knows that one of the eyes is producing an incorrect image, it just eventually kind of either shuts
It
the
shuts
image
it off.
down, yeah,
Yeah.
or modifies it to try and fix it, which is like crazy to even think of. But yeah, this is why I already liked your work, but now I really love it because I know I have the story behind it. Yes.
Yeah.
Oh
So
man.
yeah. So these types of vibrations that I felt like it would be really interesting to kind of put that back into the work, and because I actually think it has a more universal. It speaks to more universal topics like, I would say I started really thinking about kind of the unseen world too, and
Hmm.
kind of this area we're in now where it's like there is this like seismic shift, in a way, culturally and spiritually in society. And then also, like lately during the pandemic, just thinking about how we all are connected too, and how it kind of speaks to that. These patterns kind of speak to that too in a way that I really am enjoying. So, just vibration as energy is really a fun concept, I think.
Yeah,
So,
that's
I'm still
that's
reading
cool.
new things in it.
Yeah, and I think that's the mystery for somebody that doesn't know any thing about this. I think the big question is, am I seeing an optical illusion for the sake of an illusion? Like, is this a fun visual? game or experience, or am I looking at something that is more mental, spiritual? Are these waves representative of an underlying energy, or something unseen? So it's really really interesting to try and think your way through that.
Yeah, and I'm still exploring it too. I had to put this work down a little bit to work on these projects this past year, but I hope to be picking it up soon again. I love this piece. This was actually a empty strip mall out in Stanford, or no, by Barstow, I want to say. I was looking at like commercial real estate photos. It's kind of a fun wormhole to go down.
Sounds exciting.
Yeah, there's some great imagery actually in there. And this one looks more quilted, I feel like, than the others.
There is something, there's a quality about that for sure.
Which, once again, don't know what I'm getting when I make it, so.
Do you have a photo in your slideshow of you in a helicopter? Did I see that? Okay. I don't want to skip ahead, but I think that also helps explain,
sure.
like where are you getting the imagery to use for your work? And whoa, is that
that
tile?
was the mosaic.
Oh,
Yeah,
man.
that was the metro station that I did here in Los Angeles.
Oh,
In tile
so
sample.
cool.
Here's another one. That's taking a while here. Yeah, here's another one. You can't see as well in that one. But anyway, yeah, all those little bits coming together to make up an image, like how cities are built. Love it. Hopefully I'll get to do another one with that group. That's all hand cut tile, by the way, too. That's not sort of a machine or water jet or anything like that. That's like 6 people around a table with these like clippers.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
That's impressive.
It's pretty amazing.
That is impressive.
Yeah.
There we go.
Yeah, so I do charter helicopters once in a while. That was, I think, we were talking about most unusual drawing tool or method, I would say.
Yeah, there you go. Well, I hop in a helicopter.
I've done 4 or 5 flights, I want to say, at this point, and I haven't done one in a while. And actually, one of the public art projects I'm working on right now, I was signing that contract right when Kobe Bryant passed away, and they actually wrote in my contract: no helicopters, no drones, nothing in the air, please.
Yeah.
So, I haven't done that in a while, but I don't like heights at all either, actually. And we fly with the doors off because you can't get the shots aren't as good with the class there. So there's nothing between you and the outside.
Oh, man.
It's terrifying.
All in the name of art. The things we do.
Like it. And I actually took my friends up with me who are amazing photographers, and they loved it. They don't care.
They were hanging out, and man.
Yeah. The one was actually hanging out so far. The pilot was like, "Could you please not?"
Oh man.
And I was like, I don't know, that's not me. But it was an economic choice too, where it's like I was buying photographs. There's a whole group of helicopter and small plane photographers out there that shoot for corporations mostly. Right. And so I was paying them, but it was like $50 a image or something, and you can rent a helicopter for a few $100s an hour and get up there and take, like, if you have 2 people with you, you can do 1,000 shots, in a couple hours. So I was just doing that for a while, and it's great. It's a great way to see Los Angeles.
Oh man,
I recommend it.
Well, there's a lot to see, that's for sure.
But the helicopters aren't, like what news helicopters. I mean, it's like a Jeep, basically. It's very tiny and toy-like.
Yeah, yeah. Like, how is this thing staying in the air?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. That's cool. Okay, yeah. Sorry, I'm glad you had that, because I think that's That's really good because
Those
I mean, a lot of
together.
us will either shoot our own photos of what if it's a model, or rely on look using multiple photos like stock photos or just whatever you can kind of hack together.
Yeah,
So it is
that's a great
always
resource.
yeah, it's just always interesting to find or to hear what people use for resources. I want to go back though to of course the optical illusions. How are you mapping out? Some of them seem very geometric, like there's an underlying pattern to them. How in the world are you sketching this out? Like how do you do this?
Yeah, very carefully. This one's actually going to be at LAX. This is 3 by 5 feet, by the way. This is going to be at LAX. I think they're hanging it next week. It'll be there for a year. Or
Wow.
no, it's going to be opening in May. It's next to the Southwest terminal, the new terminal they just built, and it'll be there with two others that are kind of like it for a year. Yeah. How do I do it? I start with the patterns. I draw all these crazy patterns. A lot of them are from just collected various sources. One thing I did actually before the pandemic was I went downtown LA and I took a lot of pictures of all those Art Deco patterns. And
Hmm.
so I was using that as pattern. And sometimes I use seismic maps. I use all kinds of heat maps, all kinds of things.
Okay.
One uh, thing I do for inspiration, I go to a lot of talks about by urban planners um, and so I have kind of learned a lot of different resources. Like UCLA is actually great for that too. They have a lot of online resources. They're actually doing heat maps of the whole city and like
Oh wow.
where's the shade in Los Angeles. They're mapping the entire city, and they've learned that the shade in Los Angeles is very unequal. All the trees are in the wealthy neighborhoods, of course.
Uh-huh.
So, but they're actually doing a heat map of the entire city to say exactly block to block who needs what. You know,
Holy
uh,
moly. Wow. Oh my
so
god.
I go to a lot of talks like that. That's sort of where I find a lot of my inspiration is from urban planners, transportation planners. But anyway, getting back to these. So yeah, I draw the pattern, I draw the image on top of it, and sort of kind of skew it and warp it as I go. And then when you go back to fill it in, it just looks like a disaster. I mean, it's like a real mess.
Yeah, like how do you
So
keep
I mean,
track
I
of
can't
like is
figure
this a
it out.
roof? Or yeah.
Yes, exactly. Like it's very hard to kind of go back in and think what was this, and so
Yeah.
it's almost like untangling like strings or necklaces or something, where it's like there's
Oh
something
boy.
satisfying about that too. It's like if you have ever enjoyed putting puzzles together, it has
Yeah.
that same. I think it activates the brain in the same way.
Yeah. I was gonna say yeah. Untangling cords and stuff. There is certainly an anxiety to that, but
Yeah,
there is
right.
but you're committed. It's almost like the harder it is, the more committed you are to seeing it through. So yeah,
Absolutely.
there is this duality in emotions, good and bad,
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah, I live for those contrasts too. I have to say that getting back to that idea of kind of awe and wonder with tempered with anxiety, it's like just the contrasts like that are really interesting to me. Like the impulse, the satisfaction of doing something, but also sort of the commitment and how it can be a little anxiety provoking. I
Hmm.
actually love that, you know, all together. It's
Yeah,
a fun playground, I think.
that's awesome. So where do you see yourself going with the optical stuff?
Yeah.
Is there are there any ideas in that you haven't explored yet, or patterns that you're thinking of? Are considering incorporating that white negative space back into this, maybe weaving through some of the optical stuff? I'm just curious.
Yeah, maybe actually. I have thought about that. I feel like I've barely begun. down this path, actually. I've
Yeah.
only done maybe a handful of these, so it's like it's hard to say where we'll go. One thing that I really like, I don't like to plan too much. I really like to give things the space to let surprises happen. That's really important to me.
Yeah.
So I have some ideas, but I don't like to be too rigid about that either, especially in my studio practice. Because with public art is still my art. I'm not one of those artists who I have public art and then my art. No, it's all mine. But there are definitely more compromises because you have, a client in a way, which is the community. So,
Right.
it's a little bit, you don't have total freedom
Right.
usually. Sometimes you do. So, um, but with this work, I definitely do. So I like to just really take the rules off the table, and not um, have a lot of rules really, or
Yeah.
expectation, and then that way things kind of, I get led in directions maybe I wouldn't have thought of myself,
Totally.
consciously anyway.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Um,
I had someone tell me this piece, the roofs look like sushi. That was kind of funny.
that's, I hadn't seen that, but now that you mention it,
I kind of don't eat that though, actually.
oh man. So one of the next week, what we have planned is for you to come back in a Zoom call and have a conversation with us. And I'm going to be posting that link as a comment on this video for those interested. The topic for that is essentially about how a creative exercise, doing creative exercises that might seem unassuming and maybe not your thing or whatever, they might lead you down this totally different path that you hadn't considered, or maybe they might reveal something intriguing in your own work, and it could be something as simple as maybe it's process oriented or using new materials or finding a new approach to something. And I'm wondering if maybe we can talk a little bit about that. And I think that would go into
Sure.
the zine, the zines that you were exploring early on,
Oh yeah.
because this is another really fascinating topic or story. Oops, I am
Yeah. Can
switch
I show
places.
you images? Actually, I have a few images. I did. So I was asked to join a zine club that was primarily. It was all kinds of people. There were writers and social workers and a couple people in the arts, but I was the only artist in there. Um, and it was so great because I didn't feel a lot of pressure to have to make my work or have to, I don't know,
There was just no expectation.
hold them at all,
Yeah.
yeah. And so it was just a really nice, fun playground. And also, I had to come up with things pretty quickly. We only met like once a month, but of course, you put things off. So I would always have to be rushing around at the end, and I would have to make fast decisions, which
Yeah.
is really not what I'm used to having to do. So it was really just a great exercise for me. I'll share a couple images of one of them I did. And I did actually end up making them sort of based on my work. Like they were all kind of LA landscape based um, zines. Can I share this?
Okay, let
Can
me
you see
do
that?
the. Here we go.
Yeah, so I did one about the top. So we had a topic every time too, and this topic was joy. And so I found all these businesses around LA that were
Oh man.
had the word joy in them, like this bar, Little Joy, and then made drawings of those, and then
Oh, this is
um,
so cool.
Joy Temple. And so not aerial, it was like on the street too. And I would
Yeah.
just drive by and like take a picture and then make drawings from that. Joy Motors. And so it was done where it was a folded zine, so there was no stapling or anything. And so when you unfolded the whole thing on the flip
Oh,
side was this image of a roller coaster that that was
so
part of a public school, actually.
so genius.
So fun, and it was like something I made in a weekend, and it was just really I just got to use kind of different parts of my brain. I felt like, and actually, I'm doing this big floor design. I really feel that I've had to make some fast decisions, and I feel like I did maybe I think about 6 of these zines. Without having that experience, it would have been so much harder. Because
Yeah.
I'm really used to kind of taking my time and really kind of being having very labor intensive work, but also having a lot of time to think things through. And with this one, it
Mhm.
was much more having the confidence to make decisions. It definitely strengthened that part of me. So
Yeah.
I was really grateful to have done it. And I think when you're not a student anymore, it's just so hard to create that for yourself. You
It,
do kind of need a group setting.
yeah, I'm glad you said that, because I mean that's the whole reason
You know?
why that's why I have this drawing club is, I mean it's about permission, and it's just like, every month we do different drawing exercises, and what ends up happening for me, and I know for other people, is we end up creating things that we would not normally create, and that is the greatest feeling, because you and I sound a lot alike. I'm slow, methodical. I'm going to project here, overthink, and it's crippling at times, and I'll spend more time maybe thinking about a drawing than actually doing it, even to the point of convincing myself that it's not worth doing anymore. So I already thought it through, and it's just like
Right,
this is
right.
nonsense.
Yeah.
So to hear you share that experience, like I definitely think when if you're on your own, it's really hard to, like you said, create those moments and opportunities. It's almost impossible. I mean, you can
I
kind
think
of do it,
so.
but so
It's not the same
yeah,
though. And here's what I think you're missing when you're by yourself. You're missing um, support and accountability,
yeah,
and you get that in a group setting. You can't create that on your own.
yeah. Yeah,
You
especially
know.
when, yeah, like you said, when time, I mean, that's the beauty of time. When you don't have time, what's cool about any sort of drawing exercise, there's going to be some sort of constraint,
Mhm.
that you normally wouldn't have. And in a lot of cases, there's a time constraint, or maybe it's subject matter or materials. But when time is a factor, man, you don't have any time to spare to think, and you just have to react, and that's when you start
Yeah.
to trust the process, and I think, yeah, discover some pretty cool stuff that you normally wouldn't. So yeah.
Yeah, and then also just things are less precious and you're less fussy about it, and it's okay to flop sometimes, and it's
Right.
not the end of the world, all that stuff too.
Yeah.
That's so important, I think, that but it's easy, I think, to lose track, like sight of those things, especially when you don't have a lot of time, you want whatever you make to be successful,
Right.
you know, but that isn't always the best way to go about it either.
Yeah.
Sometimes having things that aren't successful, you learn a lot more that way, even though
Yes.
it's harder.
Yep.
So, um,
there's
I
all
mean,
there's all kinds of good mindset discussions that we could go off on tangents with, because it's just sound. I mean, that's kind of like the last set of questions that I always have. But I mean, you've addressed a lot of it. I mean, there's so much. I think being an artist, or any sort of a creative person, there's a real battle that goes on in our minds, and no matter where you are in your profession or practice, everything kind of creeps back up, and you have to be prepared for that to happen, and know that that's going to happen, but also know how to move past it. So
yeah,
you've
yeah,
learned,
absolutely.
you've
Like,
lived and learned a lot. I'm You've got a lot to share.
I would say it was interesting. Yeah, we talked about that a little bit about procrastination and all that fear and self doubt. But I feel like the one thing that's been really hard for me has been rejection, because I
Yeah.
apply for so many things. I get rejected all the time. And like just learning to live with that and um, taking that in as part of the process of being a professional and
Yeah.
um, has been, I think, a challenge. Nobody likes rejection,
Yeah.
especially when
Oh,
you like personal, this thing that you really care about.
right.
It's
And that's the
tough.
hard, yeah, that's the hard thing is if art wasn't so personal, it would be, yeah, I'd be like, all right, whatever, moving on. But God, it's so hard to separate the two, especially if you're obviously doing art for a profession or, for business
Yes,
purposes. And
you have to just sort of, have that, um, it's almost like immersion therapy where you just, you go through it so many times that it's like you're hardened to it, I guess. I do feel though, there was a great artist, Linda Bessemer. I remember when I was in graduate school, painter, LA painter. She said to us as grad students, she said, "It's up to you guys to go out and find your audience, and they may not be as big as it may not be as big an audience as you want, and it may not be the audience you want, but you have a responsibility to your work to go and find that." And
oh,
it's like it was
so
such a great mindset, because it's like, okay, it's not about you and your ego anymore. You're responsible to what you've created.
yeah, that's a nice way of reframing that whole thing for sure. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, I like that.
Yeah, that helped me a lot, actually. I think that was some of the best advice I probably got in graduate school, actually,
Nice.
in terms of real world practical, experience, I think. Um, so, yeah. And then, yeah, it takes the ego out of it a little bit too, where you're not so focused on yourself, and it's not about a
Right.
personal rejection. It's about, where does this work fit in the world,
Right.
and finding, seeking that out. So, yeah.
Cool. Very cool. Well, I just checked the time. We're at an hour and 15
Oh
minutes,
yeah.
which is pretty good. That's about how long these have typically run. So if you want to wrap it up, we can do that. I I'm just so thankful that you spent the time with us and talked through all this stuff. There's so much that you just shared about your art, about you, and um, I'm gonna be digesting and processing a lot more. There's just I think there's a lot to find in your work, and I've been spending a lot of time looking at it. And the more I look, the more I see, and now having you share um, your thoughts and um, the meaning behind it. I think that really deepens everything for me. So I really do
Oh, great.
want to thank you again. And if you want to share any final thoughts, feel free. But I'm good.
Oh, thank you so much for inviting me. I really appreciate it. It's really been a fun discussion, and yeah, and it gives me a platform to share my work too, which is always nice. And
Yeah.
also it makes me sort of sit down and think about all these things too, which is not something, I'm
I,
so kind of in the flow of the day to day life. It's like I don't sit down and really think about these things
I,
as often as we could or should probably. So
yeah.
that's been really fantastic for me too. So thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I'm going to post this as a replay, so for everybody that isn't with us, they'll have a chance to watch it. And I highly encourage you guys to check out Susan's work. And again, there's a lot to take in. And I hope one day, at least I can see some of these pieces at LAX, and I hope you guys have a chance too, because I think scale is a huge part of Susan's work, and um, God,
Oh, I should add too that they're not behind ticketing, so
I was gonna,
anybody can go
Yeah, I was gonna
anytime.
ask, like, do I have to buy tickets
24/7.
to on each of the airlines to see all these, or can I?
No, it's actually the Southwest. I'll tell you where it is. The Southwest baggage claim term area. So it's
Oh,
underneath
cool. Okay.
where arrivals are, and you can go anytime. I've actually sold a couple of those pieces that are hanging, and
Oh, right on.
I told people you can't have them for a year, but you can go visit them, and it's 24/7
Nice.
access.
That's
So
cool.
you know, so yeah, you can
Awesome.
go anytime. 3 in the morning if you just want to go and see them. I mean,
And
maybe wait to get the vaccine, but
true, true. But yeah, if you want to
we're
meditate in front of one of those, yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much, Susan. It was a pleasure, and I hope to stay in touch and connected. This has been great.
yeah, likewise. Thank you so much.
All right. Bye, everybody.